All right, everybody, get ready, because today we're diving headfirst into the world of Bitcoin.
But not just Bitcoin as we know it. We're talking about unlocking its full potential with something called stacks.
And let me tell you, the research you sent over, seriously cool stuff. I'm ready to unpack all of this.
Well, what's so fascinating about Bitcoin is this paradox, right? It's like
Okay.
this incredibly secure bank vault, yeah, built
What?
on cryptography, consensus, the whole shebang. But then we mainly use it to store like one thing, digital gold. So the question is, what if we can do more?
It's like having that top-of-the-line vault, but you can only put gold bars in it.
What if I wanted to store, I don't know, a stack of vintage comic books or like the deed to a virtual island? That's when things get interesting, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And that's the challenge that Stacks is trying to tackle. You see, Bitcoin security is a direct result of its design.
Adding transactions to the blockchain, it's a careful process, right?
Right.
Very deliberate, which makes it secure for sure and immutable, but also kind of slow.
Yeah.
And not exactly ideal if you're trying to build a complex application directly on top of it.
So it's like, what, trying to build a super fast train system on top of old cobblestone streets? The foundation just isn't meant for that.
That's a great analogy. Building applications, you need speed, you need flexibility,
Yeah.
you need to handle a ton of data.
Right.
Bitcoin, as it stands, its priority is security. And that immutability we talked about is like the bedrock,
Yeah.
the solid foundation of a digital economy. But building directly on bedrock, it has its limitations.
Which leads us to this idea of Bitcoin layers.
Like, we're not messing with that super strong foundation, we're building on top of it.
And that's where Stacks comes in, right? Gives us a whole new perspective on what we can actually deal with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Like Bitcoin layers. So we're talking about building like a penthouse on top of that bedrock, right? Not trying to cram everything into a basement.
Now you're getting it. It's a lot like how the internet itself is structured when you think about it.
Go on.
You've got your base layer, your TCP/IP that's like setting the ground rules for communication, right? But we're not building websites or streaming services directly on top of TCP/IP.
No, of course not.
Instead, you've got those other layers, your HTTP for websites, your SMTP for email.
Adding different functions.
Exactly.
Without messing with the underlying like plumbing.
Exactly. And that's where Stacks comes in. It's a layer on top of Bitcoin, using that security as its base, but it gives you faster transactions, smart contracts, a whole bunch of stuff that Bitcoin alone can't really handle.
So Stacks basically builds this whole other ecosystem then.
Yep.
It's faster, more adaptable, but it's still secured by Bitcoin at its core.
You got it. It lets developers use Bitcoin's strengths. I mean, it's decentralized, it's secure, but they're not held back by its limitations either. It's the best of both worlds, really.
Okay, see, this is where things get really interesting. Because the research you sent, it mentioned that Stacks isn't just a sidechain.
Right.
It's something way more advanced.
Right.
Can you explain that for those of us who, haven't gone to the blockchain universe?
Sure. Think of side chains like separate highways, right?
Right.
Each one with its own rules, its own tolls, and every now and then they connect back to the main Bitcoin highway.
Okay.
They might be faster, but they're riskier too. They're not secured by the main Bitcoin network directly, so you're putting your trust in someone else to move your stuff between chains.
So it's like taking a shortcut. Might be quicker, but it could be a bumpy ride.
That's a good way to put it. And that's a big difference with Stacks. It's going for both speed and AD security because it's so tightly connected to Bitcoin itself.
Okay, I'm hooked now. What makes Stacks different? What sets it apart from a sidechain?
Well, your research pointed out 5 key properties, especially compared to sidechains or even like native Bitcoin smart contracts, which if those were even possible. But these properties boil down to inheriting Bitcoin security directly, moving Bitcoin in and out of Stacks simply with minimal trust involved, letting Bitcoin holders actually USE assets on Stacks, a unique language for programming it all called Clarity, and this cool capability to react to stuff happening on the Bitcoin blockchain itself.
Bitcoin finality was the one that really stuck out to me. To be honest, it sounds like something out of a comic book. What does that even mean? Why is it important for Stacks?
Great question. It essentially means that once a transaction on Stacks is confirmed enough times by the network, it's as secure as if it happened on the Bitcoin blockchain itself. Imagine making a transaction on Stacks, which is like that high-speed rail, right? But that transaction, it's ultimately secured by Bitcoin, all its weight, its immutability, that bedrock we were talking about.
So even though it's on Stacks, which is faster, more flexible, it's still secured by like the whole massive Bitcoin network. It's like having the convenience of high-speed rail, but with like armored car security or something. How does Stacks even DO that?
It's really quite clever. Stacks uses a unique system called proof of transfer, POC for short. So instead of all that energy-intensive stuff some blockchains use, Stacks miners, they prove their commitment to the network's security by actually spending Bitcoin.
So instead of using tons of computing power, Stacks miners put their Bitcoin on the line. They're literally putting their money where their mouth is.
Exactly. And those Bitcoin transfers, they're recorded on the Bitcoin blockchain. Creates this unbreakable link between the two. Think about it, to mess with the transaction on Stacks after it reaches Bitcoin finality, you'd have to rewrite the Bitcoin blockchain itself.
Wow, that's really something. It's like the security of Bitcoin with the speed and flexibility of Stacks.
Right.
That's amazing. Okay, last thing I'm trying to get my head around here, this decentralized Bitcoin peg and something called sBTC. I know it's important. I'm just a little fuzzy on the details. Can you break it down? Okay, yeah, that is a tough one. What is this whole decentralized Bitcoin peg thing? And sBTC, what's the takeaway for me?
Think of it this way. Imagine you're at a busy market, right? And you're trying to buy something small, like a cup of coffee. You wouldn't want to carry around a giant gold bar for that, would you?
Yeah, that'd be a little much.
It'd be a hassle. So instead you use smaller denominations like dollar bills, and they're still backed by that central reserve though. sBTC, it's kind of like that. It's a more usable form of your Bitcoin within Stacks.
So it's like, I can trade in my clunky gold bar for some easy-to-use dollar bills at the market, but those bills still represent my gold.
Right? That's it. sBTC is pegged to Bitcoin, meaning its value is directly connected to the price of Bitcoin. It makes transactions smoother, faster, because Stacks isn't waiting for every single Bitcoin transaction to go through on the main blockchain.
Okay, that makes sense. But why is the decentralized part so important?
That's a key thing about Stacks. You're not relying on some big exchange or institution to hold your Bitcoin while you're using applications on Stacks. It's all managed by the network itself. More secure, less censorship.
So I can use these decentralized applications, use my Bitcoin or my sBTC, and still know it's as safe as if it were in my own Bitcoin wallet.
Exactly. And that opens up so many possibilities. Think about it, decentralized lending platforms where you can use sBTC as collateral. Or what about Bitcoin-backed stablecoins, making transactions even faster and cheaper within Stacks?
It's like this whole suite of financial tools, all built on the security of Bitcoin. This is really making me think differently about what's possible. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, the research also mentioned fast blocks and subnets. Is that just like tech jargon, or is there something more to it?
Think of those as like the turbo boosters for Stacks. They make it faster, more efficient. Imagine a busy highway, right? Lots of traffic. That's like your Bitcoin blockchain. Fast blocks are like adding more lanes to that highway, more transactions can be processed and quickly.
More lanes, more cars, faster transactions. Okay. What about subnets? More highways.
You could say that. They're like dedicated lanes or even whole new highways running alongside the main one. Each one is optimized for certain types of traffic, certain applications. So even if one subnet gets backed up, it doesn't slow down the whole network.
So it's about making a system that can handle more efficiently, right? So Stacks can deal with a ton of transactions without breaking a sweat.
Exactly. And here's the really cool part. Stacks is built for the future. As new tech comes out, like those Bitcoin rollups and fraud proofs we talked about, Stacks is ready to integrate them. Even faster, even more secure, even more capable.
Wow, that was a serious deep dive into Stacks. We covered so much from Bitcoin layers to sBTC to subnets. I feel like I've leveled up my blockchain knowledge today.
Glad to hear it. It's been great exploring all of this with you.
So as we wrap things up here, what's the key takeaway for everyone listening? What should they be thinking about after they finish this episode?
For me, it's this. The story of Bitcoin, it's not over. Not even close. Platforms like Stacks are pushing the boundaries, showing us what's possible, real-world applications, things that could completely change how we approach finance, data security, even the internet itself.
It's about seeing Bitcoin as more than just an investment, but as this powerful tool for a future that's more decentralized, more equitable.
Exactly.
And that's an exciting future to be a part of.
It really is.
This has been an incredible look at Stacks. It's got me thinking about the future in a whole new way, and I hope our listeners feel the same way. Until next time, everybody.